Episode 4 of Africa is called Cape, and it deals with the coast of southern Africa, mainly South Africa, where you've got the two currents, the Agulhas Current in the Indian Ocean and the Benguela Current from the Atlantic Ocean. In the first major bit of footage we get features sea turtles. So sea turtles hatching is a type of sequence we've seen many times before and since. Is nothing new. However, in the spirit of this series, it still makes it feel original. So basically you've got all these sea turtles hatching, and as we know from the various other times we've seen this footage, they've basically got to get to the water and evade all the predators. And this sequence absolutely shows that in pretty tremendous detail. The shots of the turtles going down to the beach are pretty close up, and you get a really good sense of what it's like to be them. You do feel you're on the beach amongst them, which is really good. That's not a perspective I think I'd seen before. And the shots of the various birds going for them are great, especially because it's so close up. You've got this one wee shot of this little turtle hatchling inching towards the water, and this kite just snatches it out of the air. It's very abrupt and it's very shocking, which is also very effective at showing you their perspective, because to a sea turtle hatchling that's getting picked up by a kite, it is a pretty shocking and surprising thing. And as the sequence goes on, we see various turtles getting caught by various things, various kites, crows, crabs, and there's this one little hatchling that's the last one to emerge, and it's got to get to the water, and you feel like the odds are stacked against it, but you're really rooting for this turtle hatchling to get to the sea, even more than the other ones, and it's such a great sequence. It's so high octane, you really feel for that turtle, and again, that is because you feel its perspective, because you're in the sand with it, and eventually it gets to the water and it's great, but even then it's still not out of danger. It's got the waves to contend with, and even once it gets past that, the kites can still snatch it from the water, so you see this kite going for it, but then it manages to dive, and the kite just swoops above it. It's a great shot of the kite just above the water level, and it's an amazing sequence. And we say that even though the odds are stacked against this turtle, 1 in 1,000 survive. If it manages to make it to adulthood, it'll live for like 80 years potentially. That's a great sequence and a great way of opening the episode. As I've said, that's a sequence we've seen various times before, but I don't think it's ever been done better than here. And considering there's so many of these types of sequences out there, the fact that this is the best one is pretty impressive. And from there we go into the forests of Mozambique. These forests are among the least explored parts of Africa. In fact, they're called the Google Mountains because the main thing people knew about them for a long time was from satellite imaging. That's quite funny. And here we see there's loads of butterflies. There's actually like loads of butterflies in this forest, and I don't think butterflies ever get that much love in these series. You obviously get the monarch butterflies when they pop up, but other than that, you don't see a lot of butterfly sequences. So this actually stands out as among the best butterfly sequences for me. You basically see the butterflies following the river downstream, and they're able to get up to the tops of the mountains, out of the tree line, to kind of just frolic, it looks like. It's just really nice. I think when people see butterflies in real life, you're kind of like, oh, there's a butterfly. Like, it's a nice thing. But we don't really see them that often in series, so I just thought this sequence was actually just quite nice. It also did a good job of showing you that there's a bit more to the butterflies. The fact that they know they have to follow the river was quite interesting. I thought that was just a really good sequence, and yeah, an underrated bit. And from there we go to the Gorongoso wetlands, and this is probably the most meandering bit of footage we get in this episode, and I'm not saying that as a bad thing. It's basically just following loads of bird species, but you don't feel like there's any real direction to it. It's just like showcasing you the various birds that live here. But to be honest, I don't think that's a problem, because there's a lot of birds in Africa that don't get a lot of love. You get the yellow-billed storks, the hammerkops, the spoonbills, the pelicans. The grey-white pelicans are the main stars of the sequence, I guess. But you just see them milling around, trying to fish. There's this one that's trying to catch catfish, which are obviously way too big for it, and it gets caught by a crocodile. It's just a good sequence. And again, it didn't feel like there was any real story to tell. They were just showing you this stuff. But to be honest with you, I didn't have a problem with that. I thought it was pretty cool. And then we go back to the sea, and we see all these vast sandy islands that are carved by the currents. We're mainly focusing on the Agulhas current in this part of the episode, and then we see kingfish, these really impressive predatory fish. They're really fast, they're really cool, but we see them going inland up the rivers, and there's no real reason as to why they're doing it. It might be because of the mating reasons, but we just see them going upstream and just swimming around. It's quite a cool sequence. And from there we shift from dealing with the Agulhas current to the Benguela current, which is much colder and has a different cast of animals. We focus on great white sharks. The great white shark sequence is great because I think everyone knows that great white sharks are pretty famous for being on the coast of South Africa. Usually when you're seeing great white sharks, they're hunting something. Like the last time we'd seen them before this was them hunting seals on planet Earth. So this was a very different kind of sequence. We basically see this whale carcass has turned up, and all the great white sharks won't eat it. Whale carcasses are actually a really important part of great white sharks' diets. And here we see a very different side of them. We see there's a hierarchy, all the sharks are sizing each other up, and they kind of form a queue whereby the biggest shark will feed first and then so on and so forth. And the shots of them feeding on this whale carcass are pretty great. That close-up shot of the shark emerging from the water with its teeth out is pretty great. And the music they play throughout that sequence is very surprising. You'd think normally they'd have really high-octane, really scary music, but no, it's actually very chilling music. It's very mellow. It almost feels at odds with the footage itself, because you're watching these sharks tear into this whale carcass, but the music's very nice and soothing. It's very weird, but actually I think that was really cool. It was a really different take on this sequence, because usually they'd ham up the predator aspect or how scary they are. Now here it was just like a nice chilled sequence of them just feeding. I like that. I thought it was a really good part of the episode. And next we look at African penguins. So African penguins, I think, are pretty famous now, but I don't think at the time a lot of people knew about them. They weren't that famous at the time, and it's quite weird seeing penguins in Africa. Again, it's not something I would have expected at the time, but the penguins are really good here. Because it's colder water, they can hack it, but they're still in the African heat, and they've got to deal with 40-degree plus temperatures. Not ideal for them. We see them looking after their chicks, but one parent's got to go away to sea for 10 days and come back. During that 10-day period, the parent that's left has got to deal with the sun and protect its egg from it. Usually we're used to seeing penguins in Antarctica, where they've got to protect their eggs from the cold, and you feel like they're more adapted to that. These penguins have got the opposite problem, and you feel like it's more of a struggle for them. You really get the sense of how difficult a task this is for them. A lot of them are overheating. You see them just breathing really heavily to try and cool themselves down, and you really do feel for them. It's a really, really intense sequence. It goes on for quite a bit as well. A lot of them just abandon their eggs as well because they just can't hack it, and they say that in some years, no eggs make it. And while they didn't talk about climate change in this episode, I feel like that's a pretty obvious direct impact of climate change, because ultimately these penguins would have never evolved to be there if they were adapted to deal with being so hot. I think that was an interesting thing that was understated in this episode. But ultimately the parent comes back and it's able to get back to its egg, and both parents are there and the egg survived a little bit longer. That's nice. It's a nice way of ending that sequence. Again, that was a really good sequence as well. Really good. Not what I expected going into this when I watched it back in 2013. And yeah, it was a really good sequence. And then we look at the flowers. I think the garden route is pretty famous in South Africa, and we see various flowers there. It looks really nice. And there's these monkey beetles that live in the flowers, and we see this one male try to get a mate. He's fighting this other one that's already mating with a female, and they kind of knock each other off. However, everything ends nicely. There's eggs on the flower, and the flower closes up, and that's almost where the beetles will gestate, essentially. And that was interesting. It's probably the weakest part of the episode for me, but it's still alright. Then we go and see springboks. So springboks are synonymous with South Africa. That's the name of the rugby team after all. It's their national animal, but you don't really ever see them in the series. So I think the fact that so much of this episode is shot in South Africa, it was kind of good that we did talk about them. And we basically just see them jumping up and down, bouncing, almost like they're stotting, and there's no real clear reason given for why they're doing it. It's probably practice for when they're under attack from predators. However, it's a pretty nice sequence, and it's very unusual because it's one of the only times in a BBC series like this that I can think of where they don't use an original score. They use the Nutcracker, which is obviously a very famous bit of classical music, and it works pretty well here. It's actually pretty perfect for this sequence. I kind of love that sequence for some reason. I don't know why. It's nothing particularly special. It's just all these springboks jumping up and down, but I think the music adds something to it. It is pretty perfect. And the last major bit of footage we get features the sardine run. I think that's the most famous wildlife spectacle in this part of Africa, so it's kind of fitting that we touch on that. And it is a bit different. Far from just focusing on the dolphins or the gannets, we actually focus on the Brutus whale, which is never the main character of these sequences. I think it was really good because that's usually the full stop in this sequence. Usually you see all other predators working really hard to gather the sardines into a big bait ball, and the Brutus whale comes in at the end and eats all the fish and the rest of them disperse. Very different take on it because we ham up the Brutus whale struggle. Ultimately, the whale can't gather all the fish into a bait ball itself. It relies on the other predators, so you do feel there's a bit more teamwork there because you're looking at it from the Brutus whale's perspective. I thought that was pretty great as well. It's once again a very unique take on something that we've seen many times before, and it's a pretty good way of ending the episodes. I really like that. And the diaries is all about the people filming the turtles. It only features the turtles this time. I thought that was interesting. It's the first time that doesn't feature two sequences, and it's pretty good. It mainly focuses on the conservation side of it. We see the local communities getting together to protect the turtles. That was really nice, and it ultimately does kind of spoil the sequence a little bit by very obviously showing that they were actually using different turtles to play the same one. However, I kind of gathered that from the sequence anyway, and ultimately in rewatch it doesn't detract from how great that sequence is, so I did actually like that. So yeah, this episode, once again, it's great. Highlights, I mean, the highlight for me is probably the turtles. That is pretty spectacular. Other things, I like the sharks, I like the penguins, I like the springboks, I like the butterflies, I like the sardine run at the end. Again, as usual, everything here is great. I like it all. It's all pretty tremendous. So yeah, let me know in the comments below what you thought of this episode. What were your highlights? Let me know. And next week I'll be doing the 5th episode, which is all about the Sahara. So very different. And yeah, as ever, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, or don't if you don't want to. It's perfectly fine. And I'll see you next time, and goodbye.